Hi, I'm Jahmenate, entertainer, essayist, revivalist. This is the Candor Show, the Story of My Mind series. The aim of this show is to fortify, cultivate, and provide moral support for the losing dysthymic man. Welcome.
Then did it again, go.
Jahmenate, 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 Jahmenate. Jam into the pain, jam into the rain. Never been the same. Jahmenate again.
On today's show, I'd like to introduce the Candor Show. I'm a student of life, and as such, I've learned in some of the most gruesome ways that loss, pain, and suffering are what constitutes the human condition. I'm a millennial who never truly learned what philosophical defilement was, or what happens when the idealist bubble is busted. Life is not all roses and rainbows, no matter how hard you pray for it to stay that way. Well, you might ask what philosophical defilement is. Philosophical defilement is the disintegration of all the beliefs you previously believed in. It's what is now referred to as the blue pill. This is the dude who's yet to experience the horrors of life to the point of rethinking his or her stance or moral code, both physical and metaphysical. This is the guy who's still living in infantile, would I call it infantile? In an infantile reality, you know? Life has not yet hit them for them to get to the point of waking up. They haven't received or haven't experienced the rude awakening, you know, that life gives most of us. Yeah, that's just what philosophical defilement is. So, life is not all roses and rainbows, no matter how hard you pray for it to stay that way. That can only remain as magical thinking as depicted by 𝐋𝐞𝐚𝐝 in the book The Fall by 𝐼𝐴 𝐶𝐚𝐝. One of my favorite reads, you should try it. I have been forced to peel off the naivety filters from my eyes and face life and its absurdities with holy rebellion, without flinching or showing any ounce of fear or emotion, for that's a man's preordained prerogative. The Candor Show seeks to fortify, cultivate, and provide moral support for the losing dysthymic man, the brokies, the low and average value men, the incels, the normies, the betters, the NPCs, the geeks, the awkward misfits, the blue-collar men, the weak men, the fathers, deadbeat or not, the men who suffer in silence, finding themselves stuck in a perpetual state of quiet desperation and or depression, the divorced man, divorced from reality or from marriage, the gifted creative that never made it, the addicts, the junkies, etc. The list goes on for the names that men have been given simply for not achieving that desired result. The invisible men, the men who fell off their glory or never had the privilege to actualize it, the men who've been beaten down one too many times to the point of giving up on hope. I am one of those invisible men, trampled upon by the system and of course the malignant malevolence of Mother Nature, the doomer. I'm one of those losers you hear about. But now in my case, I'm steadily trying to turn into a bloomer. At least call me Jahmenate. This show is predicated on candid, sincere, open talk, exploring different methods and best practices of how to pivot or shift from invisibility to invincibility, much like a phoenix rises from the ashes or a tree is copied down to stimulate its regermination. Together on this show, we shall germinate again. With the aid of my heuristic logosynthetic dynamism book that I've been drafting titled The Winning Dysthymic Loser, a concept of failing forward, inspired by the works of Carl Jung, Viktor Frankl, Albert Camus, Joseph Campbell, Dr. William Lamas of logosynthesis, Byung-Chul Chang of psychopolitics, the Bible, Quran, Buddhist texts, and many other modern-day social commentators like Jordan Peterson and Scott Galloway, just to mention but a few. It's an essay collection curated for the Story of My Mind series and other existential contemplations that I've had along my writing journey. A lot more is in the works. Kindly stick around and subscribe to this channel so that we can move along in concert. June is Men's Mental Health Awareness Month, and I would like to add my 2 cents into the campaign through this show. 1.6 million men attempt suicide. We lose 525,000 men to suicide every year, and that number keeps soaring, and nobody really seems to want to have that conversation, and it does bother me deeply. Are men dispensable? Are men expendable? That's a question I've been grappling and pondering on for a while now. 80% of suicide cases are men, yet women are 4 times as likely to attempt. I hope you see the irony there. This is a prime signifier that the female phenomena has a well-knitted insulation structure put in place by the collective society at large, mostly established by men, for women, especially if we agree that society is patriarchal. At the same time, women eagerly point out the redundancy of this patriarchal system that kind of seems to be working for them and working against men for the most part. Looking at the grand scheme of things, the system appears to be working for the good of the woman, leaving the man behind. And I'm not trying to pin men and women against each other here. That stalemate is very evident, and it's heavily backed with some of the statistics that we are seeing being floated around right now. Example, 80% of divorces are initiated by women. To what gain, I ask myself? 80% of men are invisible to 80% of the women, according to statistics collected from online dating apps. What does that tell us? And the remaining 20% is simply covering that population of women who are either underage or too elderly. So what's happening to these other 80% of men who are invisible? Now, 4 out of 5 graduates from higher learning institutions are women, especially in education, who are in turn absorbed back into the system to nurture young men how to face and handle the pressures of the masculine experience. Another absurdity in the system of education where why would women be the ones to train young men on how to deal with the masculine experience, yet women already being insulated by the system, they wouldn't have any clue or idea what men actually deal or struggle with. Now, this begs the question why less and less men are enrolling for higher learning, even though men have been consciously made aware that education is the key to the city. Research shows, on average, for a male to have the same level of impulse control or subservience, which is what the school system demands, there would have to be 24 years to reach a 10-year-old girl level of impulse control. Add the fact that a man is born without value and has to create it for himself, and if he fails, he's shunned by society and called a loser and brokey. This in turn has a negative psychological impact on males at a very young age, as these seeds of inadequacy and indignance are planted quite early in the minds of teenage boys, and in my view, this marks the beginning of an existential dissonance, whether conscious or subconscious, and it's later regarded as toxic masculinity, which is only a reflex or a reaction of young boys feeling like the system already from a very young age is not training them or is not equipping them to handle society appropriately. And this thus has led to aggravated neurosis, agitation, anxiety, and dysthymia, which is the breeding ground for passive ego-dystonic suicidality, after encountering seemingly endless life stresses and the ever-compounding burden of performance. Most men are silently opting out, quite quitting on life, as the overbearing tyranny of the meritocratic system of capitalism seems insurmountable. I'm painting this picture with a broad brush, but if you look keenly, this could be why most men are opting out instead of suffering in silence. It's a state of philosophical suicide. You're doomed if you do, doomed if you don't. The rise of doomerism. As Alan Sanders proficiently put it, life is what happens when you're busy making other plans. Life happened to me also. I'm Jahmenate, person living with comorbid dysthymia, ADHD, OCPD, and type 2 diabetes. Now, with proper management, none of these conditions are fatal. But with my kind of affective timber and somatic disposition, it becomes evident that it only takes one heavy existential blow to send me straight to the deep end. The Story of My Mind series is my first flagship project that came out of necessity after hitting rock bottom, experiencing involuntary ego death, the dark night of the soul, or as Soren Kierkegaard would call it, the night of faith, which is characterized by unrelenting psychic entropy, catatonic anhedonia, intense mental inflammation that has festered my existence for a while now. This is the story of my journey coming to birth and harmonizing both my affective and effective timber, the practices that I've learned and adopted to navigate my dysthymic nature. The literal meaning of life is whatever you're doing to prevent yourself from killing yourself. Albert Camus. With that in mind, this is what I'm doing to salvage the remaining bits of my mental faculties as I push through every storm that life throws at me. I want to be that breath of fresh air, fresh oxygen that's undoubtedly needed for that losing, burnt-out dysthymic man to germinate again. AI, whoa, whoa. Yeah, another twist of trope. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. On face value, Friedrich Nietzsche nailed it. But I beg to rebuttal. I beg to differ slightly. What doesn't kill you leaves you traumatized. Once beaten, twice shy. Trauma has a way of doing that. And for our military men, we salute you. But more often than not, you've opened our eyes to the realities of PTSD and the importance of mental health for men. Even after fighting for the country, which is a very noble cause, and as such is a man's primal goal, nobility. But at what cost? At what cost, I may ask? The mind is a delicate entity that requires relational care and attention regardless of how physically strong you may be. I'm not in any way endorsing self-pity, defeatist, retreatist, victim mentality. I've been there, and I know how counterintuitive it can be. This is an attempt to highlight the best psychopolitical practices, how to get men off the pit into the pitch again, both individually and as a collective. Life is not easy, and no one said it should be. The truth is, some of us have it harder than others. It's time to talk about dysthymia, neurodivergence, and other psychosomatic illnesses openly and candidly. These are universal problems anyone is susceptible to. What's your timber, my friend? Your strength and redundancies. Are you dystonic or syntonic about them? Are you a divergent misfit, a loser, a functional or dysfunctional alcoholic, a value creator, or just someone who's thrown in the towel? Maintain that pulse, I will say, or I will beg of you. Maintain that pulse. Just a reminder from my guy Aristotle. No great mind has ever existed without a touch of madness. So hold on when you're feeling like giving up. And make sure, if you're going to give up, and I mean it, up, not down. Give up, call back up, then get back up. But the question is there any backup to call? Or is it just you and your God within, if you know what I mean? See you on the next one. Let's discuss what a man is. Peace.